Dr. Frank joins me now in the studio to discuss the sustainability of the US debt situation. Frank, thank you very much for coming back to the studio. Now first, let's take a look at President Obama's proposed deficit path. Now the red line compares the last 50 years of deficits with the next 50 years under President Obama's proposed policies. Looking at this, what's your view on President Obama's proposed deficit path?
Well, he indicates that we're going to be in a situation where revenues will be greater than expenses if we take out interest payments or repayment of the debt. Okay, that's a bit like you telling me that your revenues will be greater than your expenses if we take out your mortgage and we take out your car loan and we take out your credit card loans, then everything is fine. Okay, the problem with this, as you can see, is that we have a situation where it's going to be untenable. I need to say something about debt. One of the biggest problems we have with debt is that it's free money, in the sense that the government's happy because it gets revenues, and the person who's lending the money to the government is happy because he gets an interest rate. In other words, there's no pain. Okay, I've always said that we probably would be out of the Afghan war today if we asked the American citizen to forego his flat screen TV to pay the soldier who's in Afghanistan. Okay, it's like a kid you put in a candy store. If you basically put no rules, he's going to pig out, and that's basically what we have in the case of the United States. We're in a situation where we're basically asking future generations to basically pay our expenses, and that for me is morally unacceptable. It's a bit like parents having a good time going to the Bahamas, and then at when the child becomes 20 years old, you hand them the bill. Okay, that's not what we should be doing as parents, and that's not what we should be doing as government.
What about the current structure of US debt? Today, 10% of public debt matures outside of a decade. Now, of course, this isn't very favourable in the slightest, and the size of the deficit is only part of the problem, isn't it? What other vulnerabilities are there in the financial system?
Well, it is true that the U.S. debt is very short term. We have about $6 trillion that will be due in the next 5 years, and the average maturity is only about 6 years. And a lot of people say, well, the U.S. can always print its way out of it. The problem, what they don't seem to understand, is the rollover risks that we have, in the sense that the government will have to not only pay back the principal amount that it owes, but it has to roll over that debt to pay current expenditures. Now, what would happen if interest rates were to increase? In the sense that today interest rates are about 2.2%. Okay, if we take the historical average for real rates, which is 2.7%, and we add on an anticipated inflation premium, okay, we would expect from the amount of money printing that we've seen, then it wouldn't be unusual to see interest rates closer to 7 to 8%. Now, we have to understand is that a 1% increase in interest rates will add about $100 billion to the interest payments. So in other words, we would go from interest payments of about $450 billion today to about $1 trillion if we were to increase interest rates by 5%. That is almost the entire amount that we pay in personal income tax. So you can see that we can get very quickly into a situation where it would be untenable.
Now, Frank, if we just bring up some of the figures you just mentioned there, 5.9 trillion US dollars, the amount of debt coming due in the next 5 years. It's all plain and simple up there. In your opinion, Frank, is US debt sustainable?
Well, in the last year, the U.S. Central Bank has purchased about 61% of the federal debt. It's a bit like a coach giving an athlete Novocaine so he can go back on the field and continue to play. He's probably going to make his injuries even worse. And my concern is the moral hazard of what's happening is that the U.S. government is not really willing to face the difficult problem of its debt situation because it's continuing to borrow at 2%. Now, if inflation expectations pick up, then the central bank won't be able to do anything. It can control real interest rates, but it can't control nominal interest rates. And if we have an increase in interest rates very quickly, the U.S. situation can become unsustainable.
Frank, thank you very much again for coming into the studio. So there we have it, Frank Hollenbeck on the sustainability of US debt. Now we've got lots coming up on Dukascopy TV this week, so make sure you stay tuned. Goodbye for now.